he kind of to set the stage for how the Hornets are performing now compared to just your original thoughts and impressions earlier in the season.
Yeah, well, this might be the first time you've had someone on to cover the Hornets, but honestly, you could probably copy and paste this podcast for the last 3 years, and it's the same thing, which is a lot of injuries, which have basically not allowed the actual lineup that you want to see if you're a Charlotte Hornets fan or journalist play a lot of minutes. And also on top of that, a lot of losses because they're playing a lot of guys who haven't been ready. And you can copy and paste for the last 3 years, and that's happened again. Look, I think the last 2 years before this one, they did have higher expectations. They were, hoping to get back to that kind of play-in level, maybe push for the playoffs. They had veterans like Terry Rozier, PJ Washington, Gordon Hayward, and they realized, with new ownership coming in, new front office coming in, 2 years which were kind of lost, partly due to injuries, but also partly just those pieces not quite being able to stay healthy and play well enough together. That team wasn't going anywhere, and they traded a lot of those pieces away last trade deadline. And this year was always a rebuilding year. You might say the Hornets were already rebuilding, but it was a rebuild on the rebuild. Because the Hornets owe a lottery-protected 2025 first-round pick to the San Antonio Spurs, dating back to the Kai Jones trade, which was pretty horrendous, but at least it was lottery-protected. So this was always a year where they did not want to lose their first-round pick in this stacked draft. So did they quite expect to be this bad? Probably not. And I think injuries have affected that, but also there's been some disappointments as well. But they were never pushing for the playoffs this year. This was part of the plan, although they might be a little bit further from the path that they maybe thought.
So what is their, trajectory, compared to other rebuilds within the NBA? Because I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, within recent years, we've seen a lot of teams, try rebuilds and been successful. The Houston Rockets have been successful. Even the process with the 76ers, they have been in contention. We've OKC, the Timberwolves, we've seen them, a lot of these rebuilds bear fruit in terms of at least playoff success or being a contender. Even you can mention even the Cavaliers at this point, the way they're dominating the NBA. So with the Hornets, what is it going to take for them to get to that point to be successful on their rebuild?
Well, you're absolutely right, Justin. They've been lapped by a lot of teams who were good, went to rebuild, and then have got good again, while the Hornets have just been glued towards the bottom of the standings, apart from those two outlier kind of COVID-affected years where LaMelo Ball was a rookie and sophomore, and they were that really fun, league pass sensation, young and up-and-coming team. And then, nobody could have seen what's happened the last 3 years of regression from that point. The thinking was it's only going to go up from here, right? What do they need to move forward? It's a great question. I think for a long time, this team has lacked an element of toughness. They've been easy to play against. Defensively this year, they've actually improved, but still, you look at their best two players, which are LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, they are jump shooters, right? They are guys who fray away from contact, aren't great defenders, and at the end of the day, they want to get an open shot, basically. And that's great when you've got someone who's, drawing doubles and breaking teams down and creating that. But they haven't really got anyone around that. And LaMelo Ball, I think, although he's shown potential at times, there's just too much naivety and inefficiency in his game right now to carry a team by himself to be that kind of competitive level. They're definitely better when he's out on the floor. He's not someone who makes them worse as he plays, like some people would try to say. They are 100 times better when he plays. But are they good enough with the surrounding talent? Probably not. And I think what this team really needs is to get one more big foundational piece, which hopefully they'll get in this year's draft. If they can get a top 5 pick, that would be brilliant. And from there, I really think they will then be looking to try and use some of these draft assets they gathered in the recent few years. They gathered 6 second-round picks in the summer through various trades, using their cap space to build future draft capital. They added 2 first-round picks at last year's trade deadline from Miami and Dallas, and they've also got a full closet of their own future firsts as well. So I think from this season, it'll be about, okay, can we now start putting together some of these draft packages and start trying to make some more aggressive moves to actually get better? Because they've not made an aggressive win-now trade really since Montrezl Harrell at the trade deadline in like 2021. That might have been 2022. So they've been moving in the essentially the opposite direction. So that's what I would expect them to see, is to play this year out, add a big time talent in the draft. You then hopefully have a core that complements each other in Ball, Miller, and whoever they add, ideally Cooper Flag. And then you start to build a team around those three which actually complements them, which is something that they have failed to do. They've had two small guard lineups. They've had a lack of rim protection behind bad perimeter defense. They've not had a team that makes sense on paper. And that's what they need to start working towards. But you need to know who your core guys are before you start to do that.
So two follow-ups to what you said. First, in terms of the draft, my other co-host, he was very curious about the previous draft, 2024 draft for the Hornets, and the pick that they made. It seemed like it caused some shockwaves. Can you allude to that in terms of why they went in that direction, and do you think that's going to bear fruit in the future?
Well, it certainly shocked me. I mean, Kristen Peak before the draft, former analyst for Yahoo Sports, tweeted that the Hornets had interest in Tidjane Salaün. That was the first that I'd even considered they would take Tidjane Salaün at that moment. I had a long list of 14 guys, and he was the last one on my long list. So I certainly didn't see it coming. Why did they take Tidjane Salaün? I think it was a couple of things. They have their high usage offensive players in Ball and Miller. Or at least they saw in this draft. There wasn't anyone that they're drafting to kind of really of the caliber of those two, which I agree with. So I think they did try and focus on, well, we're not going to try and add like a super high upside guy who has the ball a lot. Can we add someone who complements the pieces around the team? Salaün is 6'10", shooter. Charles Lee's system that they're bringing in is heavily predicated on shooting the ball from beyond the arc, and he's shown some real flashes. The percentages aren't great, but if you actually watch the film, he shoots a really nice ball. He shoots it from super deep, and he's the youngest player not on a two-way contract in the NBA right now. So he's very much a project. Again, I think this speaks to this upcoming year was never a year that they were really pushing for. Like, why take Dalton Knecht when you're going to suck in 2025, 26, and you might be 3 or 4 years away from being ready to kind of compete at the highest level? And I think they felt they could have the patience with Salaün. The second aspect is this new front office led by Jeff Peterson, who came from the Brooklyn Nets, is very much placing a heavy emphasis on your competitive spirit, your maturity, your practice habits, and your professionalism. And everything that we've heard and seen out of Tidjane Salaün says he's just a crazy, crazy work ethic guy, and plays with a fire and a physicality and an energy. And it's not always pretty or in control, but it's there. And you don't have to be a guy to hey, you need to get in the gym. Hey, you need to give us more on defense. Hey, your motor needs to run more hot. And that is one thing that he brings. And I think he really fits their philosophy of what they call Hornets DNA, of what they're looking for in a player. So that's something worth to keep in mind looking into the next draft cycle too, is if there's somewhere where it's he kind of plays defense when he wants and, not great things heard off the court, cross that name out for the Hornets to draft. They're not going near them. They're not making the James Bucknight mistake again.